Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name is Chris Greco. I'm the host of the Data Show. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about different aspects of data, how to use it, where to find it, studies that have used data. But today, what I want to focus on is what happens if somebody comes to you and says, I have a question. And this question concerns data. And all of a sudden you sit there and say, geez, what do I do? How do I work it? What do I, where do I even start? So that's where I'd like to start today. I would really like to start at that point. So the title of this is Making Data Work for You. Now, what we're going to do for the next 30 minutes is go through a step-by-step approach based on a real life situation where I have been given a question and I had to go out and find the data and then present the data and make sure that I notated the data. I made sure I cited the sources on the data, all these different things to make sure that I give credit. If there's one thing I have to say is give credit where credit is due. If somebody gives you data or you get data, citation, cite the source. Very, very important. I think that's utterly just it's a courtesy. And it's funny that people will get data and for whatever reason, and I don't know why, will not cite that source. And if you don't cite the source, there's a couple things that happen. One is that if you don't cite the source, people are going to ask, where'd you get that data? That's number one. You should feel more than happy to give them the source of the data so they can go out and they can see that data and make sure that you got it right. There's no problem. Look, there's no issue whatsoever if somebody comes back and says, look, you got this wrong. Correct it, move on. And this is what we're going to talk about today. So step-by-step approach. We're going to go through this. What is your question? What is your hypothesis? Where would you look for data? Is there just one place or a number of places for the data? How do you want to visualize the data? There's different ways of doing that. We'll present two of them today. And what is the difference between visualizations? What do they show? What don't they show? And notations in the data and any citing sources. So, what was my question? And I think it's important. The question was uh, the economic difference, the GDP, the gross domestic product of two countries, the China and the US, right? So that was it. You know, which is the richest country, right? Which is the richest country? And I think these are two questions that you sit back and you say, okay, what exactly is it? US China GDP, first one. And then the second one had to do with, you know, uh, who has the better economy, you know, and that's something that you can do from a, a ton of different ways, right? You can sit back and you can say, okay, which one has the better economy? So what I decided to do was I decided to go out and say, okay, what's the question? The hypothesis was that um, the U.S. has parity with China from the standpoint of good economy or whatever you want to say, and that's basically the hypothesis. It wasn't so much the question. The question was, who has the better economy? U.S., China. My hypothesis is that U.S. has the better economy. That doesn't mean that that's the claim. That's what's called the claim. CLAIM, claim, right? And when you make a claim, basically what you're doing is you're stating, this is my claim that my hypothesis will show this, right? Not necessarily true, but that's your claim. So you got the question, you got the hypothesis. Now, where would you look for the data? Now, this was an interesting situation here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you where I look for the data, because I think this is also very important, and it's something that when we talk about it, we'll talk about it from the standpoint of of what we're doing. So the first place I looked was the World Factbook, and I looked at different countries. I listed different countries. You can call them random, but I just kind of picked them out. A couple from South America, a couple from Africa, Europe, different areas, and the World Factbook, CIA.gov. I use it in another show called Worldview, and it's absolutely excellent from the standpoint of data and different aspects and all these different things. So this one is on Afghanistan. This one here, and so I thought I'll do a GDP, but I wanted to do a GDP per capita. I wanted to compare apples to apples. So I picked something that had to do with that. And I went in there and I said, okay, what is the real GDP per capita? Now, this is, 2020 estimate here. So basically, it's $2,000 per person. That's the gross domestic product. So I thought, okay, if the gross domestic product is something that is important for the country, then the per capita, the real GDP per capita, would be something that would be important because it would kind of show the richness of that country. So that's what I chose. And then I started to say, okay, well, this is really cool. And also, I wanted to do inflation. Well, the problem is inflation in this case is 2017. So I thought, well, what do I do here? So I had to go out and I had to look for some more things. So the first thing I've looked at was I did a search on World Factbook. In this case, it was Croatia, but I didn't really want Croatia. I just wanted U.S. or whatever it was. So World Factbook CIA, right? So that's basically what I wanted to look for, and this is what I wanted to do, right? And that's CIA.gov. So it's a .gov data source. I like that source. I use it a lot. I love it. That's the way I do it. And it comes up like this. And it's really nice because I can go to any country I want. I can explore all countries by um, I can clear the filters or I can do whatever I want. This is what I have right here. It's 262 results. So it's 262 countries in here. So that's good. That's a good thing. It gives all kind of maps, references about it just does a great job. Go to CIA.gov. But then I wanted to, so then I thought, well, that's great. That'll give me kind of what's going on with the GDP per capita, which is all 2019, 2020. And what I did was I went ahead and I put that into a an Excel spreadsheet. And this is what I came up with. So I came up with US, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, France, United Kingdom. As you can see, I just kind of picked, countries. And I only picked 27, about 25 countries out of there's 193. So this is a very small sampling of what's going on there. And then I sorted it for per capita income based on the World Factbook. And notice I say that. Source is World Factbook, found in www.cia.gov, and it's in dollars. This is important to because people are going to say, was that in euros? Is that in the country's currency? What exactly is that? So I made it in dollars, 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 and I made sure that apples to apples type aspects. So that's what I wanted to make sure and do. Now, I put it in per capita income, and then I did a very simple thing. I just took this, I took the country, and then I just selected that, and then made it into. I did insert, and then I just literally made it into a column chart, just like it is. Okay, so that's what I did with Excel, and this is what I got. So here we have US here with about $60,000 worth of per capita GDP, and it goes down, and you see China here, it's down, it's down here, it's not even $20,000 GDP. Now, it's per capita, right? You have 330 million, 340 million in the United States, you have 1.4 billion in China. So it's a heck of a difference in per capita. So it doesn't necessarily mean um, it doesn't necessarily mean that that U.S. is richer than China. But what it means is that the gross domestic product, if put out in the population, because a lot of people, this is called density analysis. Some people might say, "Oh, well, GDP. Look at the GDP. It's much greater overall than it is in the United States." But you have to account for the population. You have to account for that. And when you do that, in a very apples to apples relationship, you can see that there's a lot of interesting relationships here. Australia's next, Canada's third, France is down below Canada, India is way down here, and then you have I took some from Africa, Cameroon, Zambia, Ethiopia, South Sudan, and Somalia. And you can see all of these are way down here. Afghanistan is also in the lower area. So there's a lot of situations. Now you notice here, I notated some of these, and I'll talk about this in a second. What I also wanted to do was include inflation rate. I thought inflation rate was very important, from that standpoint. Now this is where I got into some really interesting situations, because now I had to really go out and take a look at that. So I did a search on inflation rate global by country 2022. And all of a sudden I got a bunch of different things here. Mapped aspects and MSM.com, which is fine. That's an okay source. Inflation.eu, which is now a European Union site that talks about inflation in the European Union, which was good. But I needed inflation rates all over the globe. What to do with that? And some of them, they presented a good map, like this one right here, advisor.visualcapitalist.com, which was great. But unfortunately, when you take a look at it, there's some things like I had Kazakhstan, which was good. I needed that. China, I needed that. United States, I needed that. But there were some in here like Afghanistan's not listed. Uh, Argentina's not listed. So there's a lot of different areas that are just not listed here. And it may be that there's just not sourced, they're not there, whatever else. And there could be some issues with that. So that's, that is where you have to take a look at some other things. So I took a look at MSN.com. Well, that's fine, but basically what it does is it lists all the different countries, and then it shows where the United States is, and all the way from Zimbabwe, which is 280%, all the way down to wherever that is. We're 103rd at 8.3%. So there's ones that are lower than that. So that is, that's where we talk about, okay, well, I still need to get more countries. How do I do that? So I tried this one, inflation.eu, which was great. Gave me all the EU countries, and I needed France, I needed China, I needed, again, they have Austria, they have Israel, which was good because I needed that one. They had South Korea. They didn't have South Sudan. They didn't have some of the other ones that I put there. And here's, United States down here. So I mean that's what they listed, and that's it. So again, I got to keep going. So I tried here, and this was inflationdata.com, which is a commercial site. It gave some good ones here: EU inflation rate, inflation in Europe, inflation in China, African inflation rate by country, which is really good. I used that. Different Russian inflation, and these were actually good. This was here. So Sudan has 260 rate, which wasn't all that great. And you keep on going down here. South Sudan has a negative 8.52. So actually, they actually went negative on their inflation rate. Interesting. But that's what's going on there. So that was good. So that helped me to get the African nations. South American nations, I tried to do the best I could. And again, here's a global one from status.com, which was fine. It's worldwide, but again, it's worldwide, which was fine, but it's not by country. So I just needed the country aspect. So that was kind of an issue there. So I did all that, and then I came up with this data set. And then I was able to come up with a data set. I was able to come up with inflation rate, all that. Now, there were two ways I could have presented the inflation rate. I could have said, well, I want the country, which was fine. I could do that. And then you keep your control key down, you can hit inflation rate, and you can do it that way. And you can actually do it by a chart, which is fine, and that works. And then you can even do it by inflation rate, how that all works by the data sort, and that would sort your data, which would be great. So all these things that we take a look at these areas. This is great to have and great to do and whatever else. Now the interesting thing is you can also do a map, and a lot of people ask me about that. They go, gee, how do you do a map? It's really, really, really easy to do in Excel. And basically the way I do it, and I'm just going to show you this map here real quick. So this is a per capita GDP. this is per capita GDP or per capita income when we talk about GDP. And here I was able to just do a country region, which I listed, which was fine. And then I did a per capita income sum. I think I'm just doing average on that. And now it it lists some of the different countries I had and the different capita per capita GDP on that. And you can see that, Africa is way down here in this type of area. Now you can always change this, change it to red. You can change it to whatever color you want. And then you can flip around and you can see how these different areas go. Ethiopia per capita income. It's not per capita income. It's per capita GDP. So per capita GDP is low. That's also low. 800. I mean, that's not like nutty cuckoo. Here you got Kazakhstan, 25,000. Russia's just above that at 26, and you have China hitting the low at 16.4, and India again. You have to take into consideration this is per capita GDP. Very, very, very important, right? And I'm going to put this down here because I think this is important enough to understand is that when you are labeling something in your data, you have to make sure that that labeling is correct. So let me kill this and let's go back to per capita. Let's go back to change this to per capita GDP so I know that I'm right on that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this whole thing and I'm going to put a 3D map on there. And we're going to kill this one. We're just going to do what they call a new tour. We're going to kill this one and we are going to um, and we're going to make this a new map. So this is the map we have now. And let's take a look at this. Well, let's get rid of this. We're going to take and form up. I'm going to delete that tour. Okay, and then we're going to put a new tour on here. Now, by making this new tour, it helps me to go through step by step how to do this in Excel. This is so easy to do, and it's such a nice deal. So now I have countries and regions here, but you notice they're only little blue dots. That's all they are. Well, what I want to do is I want to add a height field. So what I want to do is I want to add, I don't know why it keeps coming up per capita. Anyways, per capita GDP. And it's funny because it comes up per capita GDP here, but for whatever reason, anyways. And that's just we're just not going to worry about that. So that's it with that. Now, what I do is this is called a choropleth map. I'm going to fix this so that now it comes up as choropleth. And I can switch this around to whatever I want. I can make it into a flat screen if I want. I can make it into a flat map and then just do it that way. I can do, map labels, find location, custom regions. I can do a 2D chart. I can do whatever I want with these areas. The nice thing about it is that this is very, very easy to do. It's not that hard to do. So this is a nice little way to present your data, and you don't have to worry about all the different aspects of how do how do I get a map? What do I do? I know they have ArcGIS and QGIS and all these different things, and that's good. Trust me, it's good to know those. But this is a part of Excel. Use it. If it's part of what it is, then why not just use it? It's just I could never quite understand that. So now this is inflation rate here. So what if I wanted to get rid of this? I want to get rid of this inflation thing. And I sat there and I said, you know something? I would really like to have all three of these: country, per capita GDP, and inflation rate. And I'd like to put into a chart. When you put it into a chart, all of a sudden it becomes this inflation rate is very small. So that's a real problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the chart type to a combo type. And instead of having a line here, I'm going to do a secondary analysis. I can work a line, but the thing is, it's going to be confusing because a line chart is really like It's really like a time. It has to do with longitudinal analysis. So I'd rather do a clustered column and do it that way. I could make it anything I want, really. I could make it dots. I could make it a, any type of area I want. But I'd like to stick with a cluster column. When I do that, now I have two different colors, and the one shows the inflation rate, which is orange on the right hand side, and one shows the per capita GDP on the left hand side. So you can see where it's just a much better presentation, and you can make this as big as you want. You can even move it into another area if you want to do that way. So that's basically what you have here. Now, some people might say it's a little bit confusing. That's why maybe two separate charts might be a better situation. But as you can see, there's almost a correlation between high inflation and low GDP. If you have a high inflation country, the chances are that your per GDP or your GDP per capita is going to be lower than if you have a lower than if you have a low inflation. So that's basically what's going on here. I mean, in some cases, these are, Ethiopia is like 35% inflation, and that's not even the highest. The highest is in Sudan, which is 260%. I mean, it's very, very high. So that's basically how to present data, what to do. Now let's go back and make sure that we covered all the points that were necessary to cover so that we have everything we need to do. First of all, what is your question? And the question was China, U.S., which has the better economy. What is your hypothesis? That U.S. has a better economy. Where would you look for the data? We look for the data uh, by searches, which is fine. It works. You can go to a major area like .gov, and you can take a look at it there. For U.S. type data, .gov is a fantastic way to look for data. Now, if you wanted to do this painfully, you could do like I did, go out and search each country separately. You could even go to the country's website and see what they put down country by country by country. Now that would prove to be very valid because you could go to each country's website and you could make that work. So a lot of people sit there and say, well, how does that work, or how do you get that? Well, you basically you could either go up here to the actual area and put Google if you want, and do it that way, or you could, and that would be fine. Um, Sorry, COVID cough. And you could say, um, let's say you want to do France, right? France, government, website, do it that way. Coming to France, your COVID-19 visas, state.gov, France, Department of State. Now, you can do it that way. You could say France inflation rate. It may come up and give you like rate inflation, but this is all macro trends. This is all .com stuff. What you want is you want here the inflation expectations 2022 Banque de France. Now this is an FR, right? This is an FR site, which means it's France. It's a French site, but it's uh, Bank of France, which is fine. Um, and then so you could go there and you could take a look at Bank of France and take a look and see what that the inflation rate is going to be. So this is what they talk about with inflation. So you can actually get very, very detailed with what their inflation rate is. Again, all depends on how much you want to put forth from the standpoint of effort. I mean, but the more effort you put into the data, the more that you can share that and more that will work. Now, I got to show you something here because I think it's important. Is citing your sources, right? So I already talked about citing your sources, and I thought that was important. You notice here, inflation rate sources. I put all three sources that I took the inflation rate from, and this is pretty important. I mean, if I put something out there, I would hope that somebody would cite my would cite me as a source if they had something, because I think that's important to be able to do. So I can't stress that enough. Is that, the notations and the data, the citing source is very, very, very important, and it is a courtesy, and it is something that you should do for every single one of your data searches, reports, whenever you do a report. So, how do you want to visualize the data? We did it two ways. We did it through a chart, and we did it through mapping. And again, the mapping is really easy to do, folks. It really is. You just have to make sure your data is in column format, and you make sure that all those things are correct. And what is the difference between visualizations? Well, the one shows a chart, which is fine. The other one shows location. Sometimes people, they love to have that location data correlation. They like to be able to associate data with location. And when you do that, what that does is that helps your audience to make the data come alive. And that's pretty important to be able to make that happen. So that's part of that deal. And then I've already covered the notations. So that does it for me for the data show. Now, what we'll talk about next time is we'll talk about how do you write up a report? How do you write up a data report? Whenever you're doing a study, it's nice to do that study, but how do you write it up so that it makes sense to the individual that's looking at it? Now, I have to tell you that I've been taking a look at some studies, and the studies show some bias. And when I talk about bias, and we'll talk about this next time, is when I talk about bias, I talk about, it's not that people are prejudiced or they're discriminatory. They just have a bias, unconscious or consciously, in their data collection that shows that they are they're leaning towards their hypothesis. And you don't want to do a study that leans towards a hypothesis. You want to do a study that's very objective. And if you do that, I think you'll find that there's a true result. Otherwise, that result is going to be skewed and biased, basically have the same connotation. So I will leave you with that, and hope that this brought about some, how do I get started how do I get started with this? What do I do for the data? How do I make the data work? What do I do with this? And it's just very simple stuff. I want to just start there and then build on that throughout the next couple of shows. So thank you so much for watching. This is Chris Greco. You've been on the Data Show. I appreciate you very much. I wish you a very happy new year. And I will continue this type of area if you want. If you want to contact me or my brother or anybody else that has to do with this show, we do have an email. It is, I'm going to show it right now. It is candr@statisticssleuth.com. Please contact us, and then we can go ahead and we can make that work for you. So until next time, please check the data, and always, 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 always ask the right questions, and make sure that whatever you do with data, that you try to do it in an objective fashion. Take care.